gesture, what you are going to do is you're going to take a piece of vine charcoal and you're going to break it down to about a 1-inch length. Kind of like you did when you started with a massing in a ground for the first drawing. All right? Then with mass drawing, instead of just using the charcoal at its tip, I want you the whole time to use it on its broad side. The reason that we like to do that is because then you can start establishing the shape of your figure. And it allows you to quite often sort of reach one side and the opposite side simultaneously. So I'm just going to sort of work my way through the form. And as the image switches, I'm going to wipe it out. And I'm going to do it again. And I might need more charcoal. You can twist your charcoal as you go to get narrower or wider forms. As much as you can, try to get all the way up to the head and down to the feet before sort of moving back on any one form. You can also switch to your chamois at any time to start pulling out highlights. To show where light and shadow falls on the form. But again, try to keep your charcoal on its side so that you're really defining the body is solid. I'm going to do one more using the strategy before you form the body. I look for sort of a long line of the body. I look for how it repeats and sort of moves back on itself. And then I sort of go back into more specific forms. I'm interested in when the body is overlapping itself. And so first I'm kind of building a silhouette of the form, and then I can come back with my chamois to give some of those shapes a little bit more identity by defining light and shadow. Gesture drawing can be frustrating because it moves so fast, but the idea is to have you and the model sort of engage in this like activity, and sort of one body is moving in response to the other. All right. I'm going to switch process now, but what I want you to do is go through at least a 15-minute session just playing with gestures. So Bab will come back to this and do that like that. The next strategy that I am going to show you is a line drawing strategy for gesture. I'm going to get my skeleton over here. This strategy is meant to really consider our underlying skeletal structure. Let's see if I can get all the way down to the legs with my camera. A little bit closer. Hold on just a sec. Back this up a little bit more so I can give a little bit of instruction here. Okay, so a little bit about proportion that I want you to be thinking about when you start working through a line gesture. The kind of basic proportional breakdown of the body is this line is going to represent the top of the head. This one line shows where the base of the feet are going to land on the floor. And this vertical in between it is meant to relate to the longitudinal midline of the body, that sort of center line that all of the shapes are symmetrically mirrored across. We talked about that a lot with the face. Then you can always sort of block in the limits of your figure with sort of establishing a horizontal headline, grounding foot line, and that center longitudinal midline. In gesture, mostly, you aren't going to get a pose that that line is going to sit just straight. You'll sort of end up with mapping in spaces for the body that can be a lot more abstract. Does that make sense? But that should be the kind of first line that you draw in a gesture drawing. Now the next thing to think about when you're working with line gesture is the basic sort of proportional breakdown of the body. And there's a really clever and useful sort of midpoint that we can use in proportion to the body, and that's the pubis. That is the moment when the two pelvis bones move together kind of right to the center of that pubis bone. And where that sits in most bodies, although it can vary a little bit from person to person, is the pubis sits approximately at the center of the body. So you have as much body space up to the head as you do both down to the foot when you are placing a line at the pubis. So that can be a really useful sort of third line to make before you gesture. It kind of sets some parameters. All right? From there, your process can be a little looser, but what we are trying to do is use kind of line or shapes to break down other skeletal shapes. So you might have a certain kind of gesture. I'm going to do this very square first, and then we can switch to maybe something a little bit more, where we use more ellipses and ovals. But you'll think of a shape that you can sort of just block in to create a pelvis shape. And then you can move up and kind of think about a spine and block in a shape that would represent the whole shape of the rib cage. Then you can move up and just find a very simple sort of shape that can represent the head. Then kind of moving down, halfway between the lower half of the body, you're going to have a line that relates to the height of the knees, or the sort of joint between the upper and lower leg. So as you get up to that line, you can think about sort of two connected shapes. I'm using sort of trapezoids to block your upper legs or femurs in. From there, you can kind of move down, maybe have one or two shapes that you use for the shin and the calf. And I'm sort of doing some square shapes and some rounder ones. Once you get there, find another useful shape that can kind of stay connected to pull some feet into the mix. You can pull back out. We always want to get the shapes that move right off that center line or spine line. So that's going to be the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis. Get those down first. That trifecta is called the axial skeleton. And then you can move into the legs and finally the arms. Those shapes are called the appendicular skeleton. All right? And so I laid one in there. I told you I was going to use mostly square shapes. What happened was what will probably happen for you when I want it to. You're kind of aiming for the most efficient shapes to use. So quite often people end up using kind of a combination of kind of round, oval, elliptical shapes and some squares too. I'm going to do another figure and see if I can make it just a little bit less there to sort of help you see the contrast. So here, I'm going to lay down the center line, just like so. So that kind of represents that center line of the body, line of the spine. Halfway through, I'll put a blocking for my pubis that sort of divides the body halfway. This time, I'm going to make a pelvis block that's just more of an oval. I'll keep coming up. I try to keep my hand connected to the page as much as possible, so this will get to be my rib cage shape. Then I'm going to come up and find the head. One of the rules for this line drawing strategy is you don't leave a shape until you meet the place it started. So you're not just noodling around the left side of the body and then noodling around the right side. You're finishing a thigh shape, then moving down to a shin shape, then moving out to a foot shape, then moving back to a shin shape, then moving up to an arm shape for the humerus, and moving up to another arm shape for the lower arm bones. You see what I'm doing? But I'm eventually coming to a well-resolved figure that's made up of a series of similar shapes that are sort of stretched or rounded out or narrowed to relate to what I see of the body. The reason why you really want to be shape-focused and really focus on making connected shapes is they're going to be easier to turn in space. They're going to be easier to use as you see more complex poses. And so if you are just sort of working your way down the left side of a face and down to the shoulder, you aren't really thinking about what the body's doing on the other side. So when it's time to sort of find your way back, you don't have a very good sort of guidance for that. And it'll tend to sort of slow you down and can lead to sort of misproportions. Hopefully that wasn't too fast. Now what I'm going to do is just sort of demonstrate some of this process using the video. All right? So I might wait till the next pose just to start. I'm going to get my skeleton out of the way. I might pull this just a little closer again. 1 minute left on this one. Do the last 15 seconds. And Fab, if you just want to just kind of draw along with these next few, that should work. Okay, so here I'm going to find that sort of long, I don't know which way to go, long line of the body, pulling down, quick line for the head, quick line for the feet. And I'm going to go ahead and find sort of shape for the pelvis, line for the knee, seeing the rib cage sort of arc back, pulling out to a shape, an oval shape for that leg, stretching down to my lower line all the way to grab my foot, coming back, coming down to the knee, stretching out to the other leg, pulling back through. As I pull back through, I take time to sort of adjust some of the shapes. Now finally, we always save the arms for last. They aren't attached to the floor, so they're the most likely to move if you're working from a live model. This one is staying very still. Should seeing that fully behind the head, so address that. Shape for the lower arm, shape for the upper arm. After you've gone through with your original shapes, if you still have time in the pose, you can come back, continue to modify shapes and scales. Checking for relationships, look at positive and negative shapes as you draw. Pull this a little closer so you can see. All right, I'm going to do the next one. So this is a bit lower. We can see very different direction for the body. Come back, I'm going to find a pelvis position, I'm going to find a rib cage position, pull up to get my leg position, and I am loose. Initially, you don't necessarily know exactly where this is going. You don't need to require your proportions to be perfect at the start of the gesture, but you want to work fast so you give yourself enough time to recognize the form as a body, so then you can correct those mistakes as you go. I don't love my original pelvis position, but now I have time to change it. I also have time to go back and add other specific things like knobby knees, more about the muscle at the back of the calf, more about that foot shape. I can be pulling my chamois back over to emphasize lines that I like. Eliminating lines that I don't. Making shapes more specific. A lot of times in gesture, it's great to sort of work transparently. Running in a circle. And this is a longer pose, and may cut this one a little short. But when you have a longer pose, you just have more time to refine and add to that form. So things I'm noticing are the way the shoulders start finding the head. I want a little bit more height on this arm. Get this foot to sit in front of the other. Pull it out. Work through that again. And when you get a longer pose, you want to set yourself up to use that luxury of time and not just slow yourself down. So that when you get a longer pose, you get more on the page. You don't just shift your process to be slower. Look for the pit of the neck. The collarbone is always a really nice landmark in figure drawing. They give her brain space. Even draw her hair since I have time to do so. Pause. I'm going to zoom you all in a little bit just so you can see the work that I've done here. And then after you're done, you can decide to go back in with your chamois and transform or an eraser even some of the layers of line into value shapes that can finish the image more and give more clarity to the gesture if you want. All right? So just like the last one, when you're doing this at home, give yourself at least 15 minutes, maybe even more, like 20 to 30, just playing with your line gestures. Do at least 3 or 4 different poses at the pace that they give to you before moving on to this next and last strategy. Okay, so I'm gonna move you back. So the last strategy that I'm gonna demonstrate is the spiral or scribble gesture. The spiral gesture is designed to really consider the volume of the body. And what we're gonna do is we'll use either marks that act like they are sort of moving around the body like a slinky or like your mummifying form, or rocking back and forth just to touch a form's edge to edge. And what those marks are meant to sort of emulate, hold on, I got a good marker. I just gotta draw on myself. Is these marks are supposed to be sort of thinking about if you were trying to draw a horizontal line on a body which has dimension and draw it right across, like a cross contour of the body, what you have to do, like if you tried to just pull a flat horizontal line across, you would only hit a very top plane. To get a line to move all the way over the body, you have to move it along with the volume of that dimension. So you have to pull up, pull over, pull down, and connect. Pull up, pull over, pull down, and connect. Pull up, pull over, pull down, and connect. So with your marks, you're thinking about the body being actually physical, having volume, having to reach around it to be able to draw marks that show the form. But the other thing about these sort of horizontal lines when on a body is from certain perspectives, both in terms of you viewing the body and the body itself, there are only some perspective where those horizontal lines are going to look horizontal, even though they're moving across that body. Once the body starts having different positions and perspectives itself, you're going to see those wrapping lines very differently. So they might arc down towards you and look like a bunch of concentric sort of frowny arcs. They might smile up towards you as you see sort of the back of them. Does that make sense? You might see a lot of foreshortening and they might look like they get closer together as the body moves away from you. And by using marks in your drawings that move across a body, that can really be evocative and help explain the body's position to the viewer. So let me do some demonstrations of this. We're going to want a longer pose. Right, pull ahead just a touch. Circular pull, new pose. 10 minutes, that's luxurious. I don't know if I'll need all 10 minutes, but it's a good one to do. I'm going to use charcoal for this. You might use a charcoal pencil. You could actually even do this one with marker or pencil, really anything. So here I go. What I am going to do is first start with a single line that helps me sort of define that center line of her body. I'm thinking about sort of pulling down the sternum down through her navel and down to the pubis, or I'm thinking about sort of the line of the spine. I'll then give myself a couple more straight lines that just help me define the sort of basic directions that I'm seeing in the body. I'm giving myself, okay. So head, arms. This is the leg splayed to the left. This one's going out to the right. And once I get this like very basic stick figure, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start drawing lines as if they are wrapping around her body. So I'll start up at the sort of top of her torso. And I'm just making these sort of wrapping concentric circles. And as the body turns towards and away from me, I'm going to let those arcs or spirals change direction again. I'm imagining them as if they're always moving across the contour of the body. So when I get to this leg that's thrusting this way, I'm going to make my mark rotate in a new direction to really show that leg as stretched out in a direction that's different from the body. I'll even let it wrap the foot kind of specifically, just like that. Then I'll move back to the other leg. Now this leg looks like it's sort of coming towards me initially, so I'll let those circles kind of open up and move towards the knee. And then the lower half of the leg is moving away from me, so then I'll try to get my spirals to change direction. And get those shapes to sort of move away. I may go back and adjust that, but that was a good sort of first start. Okay, then I'll start moving back up the body. I'll find the direction for the arm. So it's moving from the shoulder, it moves slightly away from me to the elbow. Oops. Doing that one again. And then moves behind the leg, just like so. The other arm, that's probably the trickiest one to explain because there's a lot of foreshortening on the form. So the foreshortening shapes, I really want those circles to feel like they're concentrically moving away from me. I have a slightly different direction. Down to the elbow, and then I'll change direction to move through the hand as it moves back down. I'll come back, notice and sort of wrap my marks around that neck, and then I'm noticing in the other direction for that sort of cylindrical shape of the head. All right, I pulled all the way through the body. I still have some time, so at this point what I'll do is I'll go back to my shapes with mass or potentially line, and use that to help me sort of refine some of those forms. I might pull out some sort of interior shapes, like the line of the breast. Might further define the edge of the rib cage. I might pull out a shape that really sort of places the knee as it moves back to the hip. All right, and so I'll go back through with a refining line, but my gestures are the shapes that are really, or the spirals are the shapes that are really helping explain the volume of the form. Again, when you're doing the spiral gesture, and you'll have some control of this looking at the video because it does tell you how long each pose is. I would choose like a 5-minute at least for the spiral gesture. Just having a little bit more time to go back and also add some line work that plays with these lines that just define volume is helpful. I'm seeing that there is foreshortening on my knee. I think I've over foreshortened it, so I'm going to correct that form a little. So look. And then the other thing I like to do with my spiral gestures is I like to go back with a chamois and pull out some light planes so that the spiral shapes get to still describe the form and the volume, but then they end up functioning sort of as really useful shadow shapes. Just like so. All right. I may finish this one up. It still has 3 more minutes, but I'm going to do just one more of these before I end this video. I want to demonstrate one other strategy for the spiral gesture. Clean surface. And actually switch to the next video for this. This guy. Get to a longer one. Is it 4 minute pose? I wanted a standing one. We'll go with this one. Here we go. So this time I'm going to use a rocking gesture instead of a wrapping one. This one, sort of picture your mark reaching just to the edge of the body that you can see, not wrapping your array around it like a mummy. So I'm just going to start by grabbing sort of a center line that starts from the head and grounds him at the base. Then, just as sort of a stick figure, I will pull his appendages as I see them. And what off is just sort of guidelines. To provide an architecture for where my marks are going to go. And again, this sort of searching for shape and proportion is all part of it. Okay, that feels like enough for me to get started. So now, kind of starting somewhere towards the center, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a line that moves across the body, and sort of arcs back and forth, rocks back and forth to move through his torso. Now, as I start moving towards the hip, I'm going to let these arcing lines sort of rock a little bit more until they're following the direction of his leg and thigh. I'm seeing that sort of move back in space, so I'll sort of redirect them again until I get to the knee. Now I'm going to come down with the new direction of mark, rocking back and forth to get me down through the calf. Now I'm approaching the ankle. And then the foot's moving away from me, so I'm going to move my arcing line in a new direction to kind of suggest those lines that move across the body are also moving away from my eye. Now I'll go to this other leg. It seems to be coming more towards me. And from behind, I'm going to try a new sort of directional mark. It sort of frowns at me as it moves towards me. And then the lower leg is coming even more at me, so I'm going to make the arcs more clear. moving all the way down to the heel. From there, I'm going to get to his second foot, which is somewhat obstructed, but I'm seeing it sort of as a shape like that. I'm going to come back up. His head is sort of turning back towards me. It's like his torso is leaning away from me, but then the head is tilting back towards me as it moves towards the ground. So I will make opposing lines to sort of show that shift in direction. The arm is definitely coming towards me. So I'm really gonna let my marks, my rocking marks arc to kind of show that foreshortening, show that projection. The lower limb feels like it moves away from me slightly. So I will shift my direction from frowning to smiling to kind of get that arm to feel like it's bent and change direction the other way. The hand hasn't changed direction too much, so I'll sort of carry on in the direction that I was. Coming up here with a rocking mark that moves in the opposite direction as the lower hand, but I guess sort of follows the line of the first one because it's continuing to go away from me. I will move up to the elbow. Change direction to get the hand to come towards me. You sort of get the drift. I've made it through the entire body. Now with sort of a line that helps define the perimeter, I'll come back and refine my form a little. This gives me the opportunity to sort of claim a bottom edge, show that this leg is in front of the other. It gives me an opportunity to sort of show the direction of the knee turning away from me, suggest the calf, suggest the heel on that foot, which makes it more specific. I've run out of time on that one. And so the rule of gestures, I should just move on, but I just wanted to finish that up a little bit just so everybody could see. So again, I'd say do at least 5 of these gestures, playing between either a spiral gesture that is going to wrap all the way around the form or a rocking gesture, which is going to show the volume of the